What happens when you share the blood of history's most despised monster? When the Third Reich fell in 1945 and Adolf Hitler met his end in a Berlin bunker after marrying his longtime companion Eva Braun for just a day, him a single gunshot to his temple and Eva with cyanide poisoning, the world celebrated the defeat of fascism. Their bodies discovered by their aides, Heinz, Linger and Otto Guns, who burned their bodies, as he'd ordered, to avoid humiliation in death. But what became of those who carried his name, his sisters who had no kids to continue their bloodline, his nephews, his extended family, people who had no choice in the legacy they inherited, but would spend the rest of their lives haunted by it? Some fled to distant continents and changed their names. Others lived in hiding, forever looking over their shoulders. A few made a shocking pact that would ensure the Hitler bloodline would die with them. This is the untold story of a family that didn't just lose the war, but also they lost themselves. When the guns fell silent in May 1945, the hunt began. Allied forces weren't just looking for Nazi war criminals, they were searching for anyone connected to the fallen dictator. Hitler's family members suddenly found themselves the most wanted people in Germany, not for crimes they had committed, but for the blood that flowed in their veins. The irony was staggering. Adolf Hitler, the man who had preached about the purity of bloodlines and the supremacy of family heritage, had left his relatives to face a world that saw them as living reminders of evil incarnate. They would discover that sharing DNA with a monster meant a lifetime sentence of shame, suspicion, and silence. Paula Hitler. In a modest apartment in the Austrian countryside lived Paula Hitler, Adolf's youngest sister, his full sibling from the same mother and father, Alois Hitler, and his third wife, Clara Pels. She was the only sibling who survived to adulthood. She was the last person on earth to legally bear the Hitler surname. Born in 1896, 7 years younger, she was quiet, apolitical, and loyal to her brother despite everything. Paula had watched her brother's rise to power from a distance, working quietly as a secretary and avoiding the spotlight that consumed her infamous sibling. But distance meant nothing when the Allies came calling. In May 1945, just weeks after Hitler's suicide, Paula was dragged by the US forces from her hiding place and subjected to intense interrogation in Salzburg. American intelligence officers were convinced she must know something, anything, about her brother's crimes or his final days. They were wrong. "I only knew what the newspapers told me," Paula insisted during hours of questioning. She painted herself as a simple woman who had been deliberately kept in the dark, claiming complete ignorance of the Holocaust and the machinery of death her brother had constructed. Whether this was truth or self-preservation, no one could say for certain. Released but not free, Paula faced a world that had no place for her. She lived a reclusive life in a 2-room apartment near Berchtesgaden, not far from the ruins of her brother's mountain retreat. She was unemployable. No one would hire a Hitler. She was friendless. Who would associate with that name? She survived on welfare and the occasional anonymous gift from sources she never revealed. Some whispered that former SS men, still loyal to their dead Führer, secretly supported her. Others believed she lived off hidden Nazi gold. In 1952, Paula made a decision that would haunt historians for decades. She changed her name to Paula Wolf, the same pseudonym her brother had used in his early political career. Was it coincidence? A twisted form of nostalgia, or had she never truly escaped his psychological grip? The answer died with her. Paula Hitler Wolf lived her final years as a ghost, emerging only once for a British television interview in 1959. When asked about the Holocaust, she maintained her wall of denial. "I knew nothing of these things," she repeated. Her voice hollow and distant, she offered no condemnation of her brother, no sympathy for his victims, only the same empty refrain that had protected her for over a decade. On June 1, 1960, Paula died alone of a heart attack. She was 64 years old. There was no funeral, no mourners, no flowers. She was buried in a simple grave, marked only with her real name, Paula Hitler. But even in death, she could not escape. In 2005, her remains were quietly exhumed and reburied under an unmarked stone. The last Hitler name had finally been erased from the earth. She was the last immediate family of the Hitler's family, but the family tree didn't end there. Angela Hitler. While Paula had kept her distance from Adolf's inner circle, his half-sister Angela Hitler had made a different choice, one that would entangle her fate with his in ways she could never have imagined. Born in 1883 by Alois Hitler and his second wife Franziska Matzelsberger, that made her Adolf's elder by 6 years. Angela was a devout Catholic and a widow of Leo Raubal, a junior tax inspector. She had 3 children with her late husband Efriede, Leo and Geli, who committed suicide in 1931 when her half-brother began his rise to power. In the 1920s, as Hitler's political star ascended, he called upon Angela to manage his household at Obersalzberg and his mountain retreat. She was close enough to be considered part of Hitler's inner domestic circle during the 1920s and early 1930s. She went along with her daughters, Efriede and Geli Raubal, whom Hitler was reportedly obsessed with. Angela became his housekeeper, confidant, and gatekeeper, overseeing his private world with the efficiency of a military commander. She was one of the few women Hitler trusted completely, controlling access to his inner sanctum and managing the daily rhythms of his secluded life. But Angela was no mere servant. She held strong opinions about her brother's choices, particularly his relationship with Eva Braun. To Angela, Eva was frivolous, inappropriate, and unworthy of a man she still saw as a misunderstood genius. The tension between the two women grew increasingly toxic, turning Hitler's private world into a battlefield of competing loyalties. The breaking point came in 1936, when Angela made a decision that would forever alter her relationship with her brother. Without Hitler's permission, she married her longtime partner, architect Dr. Martin Hamitcher, in a small ceremony in Braunau am Inn, Hitler's birthplace. The symbolism was unmistakable, and Adolf's rage was swift and absolute. From that moment on, Hitler erased Angela from his life. He never again called her by her maiden name, referring to her only as Frau Hamitcher, as if she had been cut from the Hitler bloodline entirely. In his correspondence and memoirs, she virtually disappears, a deliberate act of family excommunication. Yet blood, it seemed, retained some power over the dictator. As the war reached its apocalyptic climax and Allied bombs rained down on German cities, Hitler performed one final act of family loyalty. When Dresden was firebombed and Angela's family was in danger, he ordered their evacuation to safety. His personal accounts transferred over 100,000 Reichsmarks to support them, and his will provided Angela with a generous monthly pension. Whether she ever received that money remains unknown. After the war, Angela vanished into the ruins of the country her brother had destroyed, settling in Hanover under her married name. She lived simply, even running a small business for a time, but like Paula, she never publicly condemned Adolf or acknowledged the Holocaust. "I heard only what others heard," she would claim when questioned. On October 30th, 1949, Angela died of a stroke at age 66. She left no memoir, no confession, no reckoning with the past. Her death passed quietly, noted only in passing by a world eager to forget. Another branch of the Hitler family tree had withered and fallen, leaving behind only silence. The extended family. Beyond Hitler's immediate siblings lay an extended network of relatives who would face their own reckonings with history. These were people who had lived on the margins of Adolf's life but found themselves forever tethered to his legacy by the accident of shared blood. Alois Hitler Jr. The most distant of these relatives was Alois Hitler Jr., Adolf's elder half-brother, born in 1882. 23 years older than Adolf, Alois had grown up under the same tyrannical father, but had long since severed emotional ties with his younger sibling. Their relationship was marked by rivalry and resentment. Alois later recalled being beaten for mischief, while Adolf's antics were excused as cleverness. By his early 20s, Alois had become a drifter, moving from job to job across Europe. He eventually landed in Dublin, then London, where he married an Irish woman named Bridget Dowling in 1911. Their son, William Patrick Hitler, would later become one of the most notorious members of the Hitler clan. But Alois soon abandoned his family, returning to Germany and leaving behind a trail of minor scandals and petty fraud. During the Nazi years, Alois lived quietly in Berlin, running a small cafe that ironically became a hangout for SA stormtroopers. Despite their shared blood and the power of the Hitler name, Adolf offered his half-brother no favors, no recognition, no acknowledgement. In Mein Kampf, Adolf made no mention of Alois at all, a conspicuous omission that spoke volumes about their relationship. After the war, Alois simply vanished. He changed his name to Alois Hitler and settled in Hamburg, where he lived in complete obscurity. He died of natural causes on May 20th, 1956, largely forgotten. His grave in Hamburg's Ohlsdorf cemetery went unvisited for decades before being reclaimed by nature, just another lost plot in history's vast graveyard. William Patrick Hitler. But it was Alois Jr., a son, William Patrick Hitler, who would become the most defiant member of the Hitler family. Born in Liverpool in 1911, William grew up with a surname that would alternately open doors and slam them shut. In the 1930s, as his uncle's power grew, William made a fateful decision. He would seek his fortune in Nazi Germany. Moving to Berlin, William believed the Hitler name would guarantee him a position within the regime. He was spectacularly wrong. Adolf despised his nephew's opportunism and was said to have publicly berated him. The relationship soured quickly, and William found himself increasingly disillusioned with both his uncle and the Nazi ideology. In 1939, William made a choice that would reverberate around the world. He gave an explosive interview to Look magazine titled "Why I Hate My Uncle." In it, he portrayed Adolf as petty, cruel, and vindictive, describing how the future Führer would strike flowers with a whip in fits of rage. The interview was a sensation, and William never looked back. That same year, William and his mother fled to America. Once there, he made an even more extraordinary decision. He enlisted in the US Navy to fight against Nazi Germany, but he was denied and then wrote a personal note to President Franklin D. Roosevelt offering to serve the country. It was both a personal and political rejection of his uncle, who reportedly referred to him as "my loathsome nephew." William was accepted, and he served honorably as a hospital corpsman from 1944 to 1945, earning his American citizenship through service against the Third Reich. After the war, William made his final break with the past. He legally changed his surname, first to Hiller, then to Stuart Houston, erasing the Hitler name forever. He settled in Patchogue, Long Island, New York. William married a German-American woman named Phyllis Jean-Jacques and raised 4 sons, Alexander, Louis, Howard, and Brian. He lived a quiet life, ran a mini-business by analyzing blood samples. William allegedly brought them up under an implicit agreement that none of them would marry or produce offspring, thereby terminating Hitler's lineage. William Stuart Houston passed away in 1987 when he was 76 years old. He never openly supported or justified Adolf Hitler and devoted considerable portions of his life to eliminating any connection to him entirely. The Pact of Silence. William's sons would face a choice that would define the rest of their lives: what to do with the legacy they had inherited. They had changed their name, but they could not change their blood. The weight of their ancestry hung over them like a dark cloud, affecting relationships, careers, and personal happiness. In 2018, Alexander Stuart Houston, the eldest of William's sons, gave a rare interview to the Times of Israel. When asked about persistent rumors of a family pact to end the Hitler bloodline, he initially laughed it off, but then he revealed the truth that lay beneath the myth. The thing about the Hitler family is that we didn't want to pass that on to anyone else. The journalist David Gardner, who spent years tracking down Hitler's living relatives in the 1990s, claimed that the surviving men had indeed discussed their shared burden. According to Gardner, they had reached an unspoken understanding. None would marry and have children. The Hitler bloodline would end with them. Whether such a formal agreement ever existed remains unclear. What is certain is the result. All of William's sons remained childless. Howard, the only one who was engaged to be married, died in a car accident in 1989 without children. The surviving brothers, Alexander, Louis, and Brian, are now in their 70s, living quiet lives on Long Island, the last American bearers of Hitler's blood. Alexander works as a social worker, while Louis co-runs a landscape business with Brian. Alexander recounted how one of his brothers had become engaged to a Jewish woman, only for the engagement to end when she discovered his true identity. Even decades after the war, the Hitler name retained its power to destroy love, trust, and ordinary dreams. The Raubal Connection, tragedy and obsession. But perhaps the most tragic branch of Hitler's family tree involved the children of his beloved half-sister Angela, the Raubal family. These were the relatives Hitler kept closest to his heart, and their stories would become intertwined with some of the darkest chapters of his personal life. Geli Raubal, the beloved niece among all of Hitler's relatives, none captured public fascination or spawned more tragic speculation than Angela Maria Geli Raubal. Born in 1908, Geli was Adolf's favorite niece, and by the mid-1920s, she had become far more than just family. She was his obsession. In 1925, at just 17 years old, Geli and her mother Angela moved into Hitler's Munich apartment. From that moment, the young woman's life ceased to be her own. Hitler, then rising rapidly in political circles, kept Geli on an unnervingly tight leash. He dictated what she wore, forbade her from dating, and controlled her social circle with the precision of a prison warden. University studies in Vienna were curtailed when Hitler decided it was unsafe for her to be too far from his reach. Visitors to the apartment noted how Geli's bright, spirited demeanor began to fade under Adolf's suffocating control. Whispers spread through Munich's social circles. Was she merely a ward, or something more? The nature of their relationship remains one of history's most disturbing mysteries. Some historians suggest Hitler harbored incestuous feelings for his niece. Others describe Geli as a naive girl caught in the twisted psychology of a man obsessed with control and purity. Whatever the truth, their bond was undeniably intense, possessive, and ultimately destructive. On September 18, 1931, Geli was found dead in Hitler's apartment, a bullet wound through her chest. The Walter pistol that fired the shot had belonged to Adolf himself. She was just 23 years old. The official verdict was suicide, but from the start, rumors of foul play haunted the case. Some claimed Geli had been trying to flee Hitler's control. Others whispered of a pregnancy, either by a forbidden lover or by Hitler himself. A few even suggested that Hitler's inner circle had helped cover up the truth to protect his political future. The Munich police investigation was cursory at best, and many questions were never answered. What is certain is that Geli's death shattered Adolf Hitler. For days, he reportedly locked himself in his room, refusing food or visitors. He kept a portrait of her with him for the rest of his life, and some historians believe her death marked a turning point in his psychological development, the moment when whatever humanity remained in him finally died. Leo Raubal Jr., the nephew who survived Stalin. If Geli was the niece whose death haunted Hitler's private world, her brother Leo Rudolf Raubal Jr. was the nephew who came closest to being part of Adolf's inner circle. Born in 1906, Leo bore a striking resemblance to his infamous uncle, tall, broad-shouldered, with piercing features and Aryan coloring that would have fit perfectly into Nazi propaganda. Hitler took a particular liking to Leo, often inviting him to dine at the Berghof, his mountain retreat in the Bavarian Alps. Unlike other family members, Leo was treated almost like a member of Hitler's extended household, though always kept at arm's length. Dinner guests recalled Hitler referring to Leo affectionately as mein Neffe, my nephew, in front of party members. But family favor could not spare Leo from the war his uncle had unleashed. In October 1939, as World War II exploded across Europe, Leo was drafted into the Luftwaffe's engineering corps. Despite his family connections, Leo was no desk officer. He served in the brutal cauldron of the Eastern Front, where Hitler's ambitions turned cities to ash and cost millions of lives. In January 1943, Leo was seriously wounded at Stalingrad, one of the bloodiest battles in human history. When the shattered remnants of the German Sixth Army surrendered on January 31st, Leo was among the prisoners taken by Soviet forces. News of his capture reached Hitler swiftly, and in an uncharacteristic show of personal vulnerability, the Führer attempted to intervene. Hitler proposed a prisoner exchange, even offering to release Yakov Djugashvili, Stalin's own son, in return for Leo. But Stalin's response was cold and final. War is war. There would be no mercy, not even for family. Leo Raubal vanished into the grim oblivion of Soviet captivity, where he would spend the next 12 years in prison camps, a forgotten prisoner of a war that had already claimed the rest of his family. It wasn't until September 1955, after intense negotiations between East and West, that Leo was finally released. When he returned to Austria, he quietly resumed life as a chemistry teacher and engineer. There were no public interviews, no memoirs, no attempts to capitalize on his connection to history's most infamous figure. He had seen too much, and perhaps lost too much, to ever speak of it. Leo married a fellow schoolteacher named Edith and had one son, Peter, born in 1931. They lived quietly in Linz, not far from where Hitler had spent his boyhood. Leo passed away in 1977 while on holiday in Spain, buried without fanfare in Linz. His son Peter, now an engineer himself, chose an even quieter path, never marrying, never having children, and never speaking publicly about his infamous family connection, Efriede Raubal. Efriede Raubal, the youngest of Angela Hitler's children, lived a life almost entirely removed from the notoriety surrounding her family. Born in 1910, Elfriede deliberately kept to the background, even as her siblings were drawn into Adolf Hitler's gravitational pull. While others basked in or suffered from the limelight of association, Elfriede quietly carved out her own path. In 1937, she married Ernst Hager, a respected law professor, and settled into a domestic life in the Salzburg and Linz regions. There were no headlines, no rumors, no party connections, just a quiet existence lived deliberately on the fringes of history. Whether by choice or by fortunate circumstance, Elfriede avoided the political storm that engulfed much of Europe. During the war years, she remained entirely out of the spotlight. Unlike her siblings, Gel, Leo, or even her mother Angela, Elfriede is absent from Hitler's memoirs, correspondence, and photographs. She had 2 children, including a son, Heiner Hager, born in January 1945, in the final winter of the war, just months before the Third Reich collapsed in flames. Elfriede lived a long and largely anonymous life, passing away on September 24, 1993, at the age of 83. She died in quiet obscurity, far removed from the scrutiny and scandal that haunted other members of the Hitler family. Her son Heiner likewise chose privacy over publicity. He never had children, ensuring that the Hitler bloodline continued to diminish, not by tragic circumstance, but by deliberate decision. The final generation. Today, scattered across Europe and America, live the final descendants of Adolf Hitler's bloodline. They are not many, perhaps 5 men in total, and they represent the end of a genetic legacy that once threatened to reshape the world. In Austria, Peter Raubal, now in his 90s, lives in quiet retirement in Linz. Despite carrying the family name, through his mother's side, Peter has chosen a life of complete anonymity. He rarely speaks to the press, avoids public appearances, and has declined all interview requests since the 2000s. His silence is absolute, his privacy fiercely guarded. Nearby lives Heiner Hochegger, born in the final months of the Third Reich in January 1945. The son of Elfriede Raubal, Hitler's youngest niece, Heiner has lived his entire life outside any media spotlight. He never held political views publicly, never gave statements, never published memoirs. Like Peter, he never married and had no children. On the other side of the Atlantic, in suburban Long Island, live the final American descendants of the Hitler bloodline. Alexander, Louis, and Brian Stewart Houston are now in their 70s, living simple, unassuming lives far from the corridors of power their great-uncle once walked. They run small businesses, tend their gardens, and live behind the anonymity of changed names and suburban hedges. In the end, the Hitler family line dies not with dramatic gestures or government intervention, but with quiet personal choices made by individuals who want nothing more than to be left alone. There are no grand pronouncements, no public reckonings, no attempts to either defend or condemn their infamous ancestor. The irony is almost too perfect to believe. Adolf Hitler, who preached the supremacy of bloodlines and the importance of racial purity, who saw himself as the founder of a 1,000-year Reich, has left no one to carry his name, his face, or his DNA into the future. The man who promised his followers immortality through blood and soil has achieved instead the ultimate extinction, genetic oblivion. His living relatives have chosen silence over sensation, privacy over profit, anonymity over acknowledgement. They have made themselves ghosts, living reminders of a past that refuses to die but will leave no future trace. In their quiet suburban homes and modest European apartments, they represent perhaps the most effective form of denazification ever achieved, the simple refusal to continue. The Hitler name, once shouted in rallies and carved on monuments, once feared and revered across continents, will soon exist only in history books and museum displays. It will not echo in the laughter of children or be passed down through family trees. It will not live in blood. In the final analysis, the question, what happened to Hitler's family, has a simple answer. They chose to disappear. And in that disappearance, they found perhaps the only form of redemption available to those who inherit the unforgivable, the courage to end what should never have begun. The Hitler bloodline ends not with fire and fury, but with the quiet dignity of people who understand that some legacies are too dark to pass on. In their silence, they speak volumes about the power of choice, the weight of history, and the ultimate triumph of humanity over the monsters of the past. The 1,000-year Reich lasted 12 years. The Hitler bloodline, it seems, will last little longer.